see you. So this week's Torah portion, Parshas Mishpatim, I believe that we calculated has about how many percent of the mitzvahs was it, Steve, this week? 8%? 8.7% of the mitzvahs of the Torah. Now, there's many different mitzvahs in this week's Torah portion. So I'd like to zoom in on one particular mitzvah, and that is the mitzvah of the indentured servant. It's right at the beginning of the Torah portion. This is a mitzvah which is really difficult for us to understand, but I'm hoping that by the time you leave here this morning, you'll have reinterpreted your relationship with this mitzvah on a way which is very, very personal. Joining us, good. So, you read this mitzvah, you come to shul and you read this one and you're like, Torah needs an update. The Torah is so old-fashioned. It's just out of touch. Take a look at this mitzvah. Let's read it a second, okay? It's page 453. I'm sorry. Page 453. It's at the very beginning of the Torah portion. Here's how it goes. So while Moses was still on Mount Sinai, God gave him the general outline of all the Torah's commandments. In this context, he repeated the legal code that he gave the people at Marah, and then Moses reviewed with them before the giving of the Torah. God began. Here starts. Okay, these are some of the laws that you must set before the Israelites when you descend from the mountain. What's the first mitzvah we hear? The first mitzvah, seriously, this is the first one we hear. The Hebrew bondsman. What is a bondman anyways, right? So, this is the first thing that Moses tells us after the Mount Sinai. Like seriously, this is so old-fashioned. Take a look. If any of you buy such a Hebrew bondman from the court, he must serve as master for 6 years, and in the 7th year he must go free without further obligations to make any payment. He will also go free in the Jubilee year, even if this occurs prior to the end of the 6 years from when he was purchased. Just to explain what's going on. What's a Hebrew bondman? I don't think you can buy them on Amazon. But
he's paying for.
It's an indentured servant. This is a guy that stole.
He stole.
Right? It's like a guy that goes to the restaurant and then he gets the bill and he says, "Oops, I don't have my wallet." So they send him to the back, and he works in the back kitchen, washing dishes until he pays off his bill. That's what this guy is. He's a guy that stole, and now he can't quit. He's indentured because he has to work in order to pay off his debt. So if you buy such a bondman from the court, I guess maybe the court will sell these guys to pay off a debt to whoever. It's a penalty, exactly right. Okay, so it's starting to make a little bit more sense. Thank God we're not using the word slave here, because that's like horrible. No, some translations of the Chumash, they'll just say the Hebrew slave, and you're like, forget about it. You just see the title and you turn the book and you go somewhere else, right? So at least this is not such a horrible translation. It's good. It's better.
We have slaves today.
Exactly.
Here in America.
But you'll discover in a moment that we do. So what happens? The rule is the guy works for you. He's not allowed to quit. Okay. There's different rules about the dignity with which you're supposed to treat him. There's sort of limitations of what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. But the guy's allowed to work for 6 years only. And in the 7th year, which is the sabbatical year, he goes free. That's the rule. The 7th year, we have our fields that go fallow. In the 7th year, you're not allowed to work your fields in the land of Israel. This is a very, very important mitzvah, which is valid until this very day in Israel. Every 7th year, the farmers are supposed to quit working for one entire year. It's like shabas for a year. Shabas is 1 day a week. The 7th day, the 7th year.
It's good for the soil.
It's good for the soul, but also it's an unbelievable exhibit of faith. Where you say, God, listen, I trust you. I'm going to dedicate my life to spirituality this year, right? To my true purpose upon this earth, knowing or trusting that you will provide for me. And the Torah promises that if you do so, I will provide for you in the 6th year, that you'll have enough for the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th year. You'll have a triple produce in the 6th year. It's very interesting. And till today in Israel, you have these huge billboards in the fields. If you go to Israel in the sabbatical year, it says, I proudly observe the law of Shemitah. This farm preserves the law of Shemitah, right? There are tragically some farmers that don't. And that's a huge problem for us as a collective nation when we're turning our backs on God. It's a problem for us as a collective, right? So
we were there in Shemitah.
We were there in Shemitah, exactly. So now, that being said, and by the way, you never want to buy produce from Israeli farms in the 7th year. When you're in Israel, you don't want to buy the vegetables or the fruits from Israeli farmers, because if they were bought from Israeli farmers, it means they were product of the 7th year from a Jewish farm. You want to only buy them from non-Jewish farms.
How do you know?
They're certified, kosher certification in Israel. They'll tell you where it comes from. So So this is, it's kind of like it's you want to make sure that the most treif thing in Israel is fruits and vegetables in the 7th year. It's very interesting. And by the way, even when you get these programs where they send you stuff from Israel, if you send a certain money to Israel, then they'll send you every month, some produce from Israel. So if you get olive oil or some of those items that they sent you, and it comes from soon after the 7th year, you can't buy the wine from Israel that was produced in the 7th year is 100% treif, right? Anyways, so what happens is the bondsman goes out in the 7th year. Something else that also happens in the 7th year is all debts are canceled. All debts are canceled unless there was a point in Jewish history where the Jewish people were not lending money to each other because they were like, look, I'm going to lend you money so that your loan will be canceled in the 7th year. I'm not a fool. So they did something called a legal arrangement, just like we spoke about charging interest to a fellow Jew, called a heter iska. They made something called a prusbul, which basically was a loophole to allow you to get around it because cash flow was drying up. Anyways, let's go back to the bondsman. It will be explained presently that if his master wishes, he may give the bondsman a non-Jewish bondwoman by whom to father non-Jewish children, who will then be the master's legal servants. Ooh. But this applies only if the bondman is already married to a Jewish woman. If he comes to his master single, his master may not give him a non-Jewish bondswoman for a wife. And thus, when he leaves his master's service, he must leave still being single. On the other hand, if he has a Jewish wife and he begins his term, his master is obligated to provide not only for the bondsman's needs, but also for those of his wife and family, as long as the man is in the master's service, right? So that's interesting, right? So it's very humane here, allowing his family to be taken care of by the employer. Even though they do not become servants together with him, the wife and children, nevertheless, the employer is responsible. When he leaves his master's service, his wife will leave his master's care with him. His master will no longer need to provide for the wife and children of the servant, of the employee. Now, I'm going to skip over to here, verse 5. But if, in such a case, the bondsman says at least twice, I am fond of my master, my non-Jewish wife, and my non-Jewish children, and I do not want to go free. So let's say he says that. So the servant who's now married to a non-Jewish woman, which was the Torah sanctions, it's okay. It's totally fine under these conditions, right? But he just doesn't keep the wife, right? And he says, look, I'm married to this, and I don't want to leave. I want to stay in servitude, which is a little difficult for us to relate to. What do you mean you want to stay in servitude? We're Americans. This is the land of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Like, why would anybody want to perpetuate any form of servitude? It just doesn't make any sense to us, right?
Makes sense from his perspective.
How does it make sense?
Because he was so poor, he had to steal, and he couldn't pay back. He doesn't know how to make a living.
Okay, but it's not the American dream, Okay, fine. I hear you. Then let's just see what happens.
Obligated to take care of it.
Okay, maybe there's nowhere to go. Okay, let's see what happens. Then his master must bring him to the court that sold him, and he must take him to the door. He shows him the door. The door must be standing upright like the doorpost. His master must then pierce his right earlobe straight onto the door. He takes an awl. You know what an awl is, Mike? A-W-L?
Sure.
It's like a nail. And he kind of he basically pierces his ear to the door kind of thing with an awl. And the bondman must serve him until the next Jubilee year. Now, if he did this, which means he voluntarily submits to servitude into the sabbatical year, it happens every 7 years. Now, if he does this once, that means he's good until the Jubilee year. Then he has no choice. There's no sticking around. Everybody's freed in the Jubilee, the 50th year, right, which is the 7th sabbatical, right? Now, when he will go free, whether he wants to or not. Okay, that's the end of the section. Now, we read this and we're like, okay, that's a little bit difficult to relate to. Why would that be something which is important for me to come to shul this Shabbos to hear? Why do I need to come to shul to learn about this Hebrew bondman, this indentured servant that has absolutely nothing to do with my life, other than, unless I'm so bored that I have nothing better to do than to learn about a completely abstract situation, which has no bearing on my life, and maybe, why would I come to shul? What is this relevant to us?
It's a reminder for Torah.
Yeah, it sounds like borderline illegal. Yeah, like keeping indentured. Are you allowed to have an indentured servant today? I don't know.
I don't think so. Not in the woke culture.
Oh, not the woke culture. Yeah, exactly.
But if you buy a trafficked person from Mexico, then
so folks, let me open your eyes, folks. Let me open your eyes as mine were opened by our Rebbe's teachings. Remember what Hasidus is? Hasidus is the soul of Torah, which means when you're looking at me, you see my body. You don't see my soul, but the soul's inside, right? You're looking at your phone, you see your phone, but you see the body of the soul of the phone, the hardware. You don't see the software. Within the corpus of Torah, within the superficial visual, deep within embedded lies the secrets of Torah, the mystical components, and that is Hasidus, the soul of Torah. So let's bring this piece to life. The Rebbe focuses by saying, why do we pierce the ear? Of all the body parts, why the ear?
Torah.
So Rashi points out, and he says, because it was the ear that heard just last week's Torah portion. For the people of Israel are my servants. Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. The ear heard that. They are my servants, and they are not servants of servants. And you, who willfully submit to be the servant of my servant, you're violating that which the ear had heard, and that's why the ear gets pierced. That's what Rashi says 900 years ago. Now, with that introduction, the Rebbe introduces and he tells us like this. You can relate to the Hebrew bondman, to the indentured servant. Check this out. We work 6 days a week. We're slaves to our materialism. We're slaves to the corporate world out there. We're incessantly checking the news, the stock market. We need to know what's happening on the political arena. We need to know who's running, who's not running, who said something. I'm not even familiar with the terms. The NASDAQ, the Dow, the IPOs, right? We're like, when you're in the stock market, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're watching that thing like a hawk. You're constantly in a state of potential anxiety that if somebody says something and something flips. I remember in South Africa in the early 80s, the rand was stronger than the US dollar. The rand is stronger than the US dollar. And it was overnight that President Pukputa, he was president of South Africa, and he basically, during apartheid, he basically told the world to take a hike. Like, don't tell us what to do. Have a nice time. We're good. We don't need you. And if I remember correctly, what happened was that the rand tanked overnight. And everything in South Africa devalued. It caused a tremendous upheaval. If you're living in that world, you're a slave to, you have some maniac, despotic tyrant ruler in the Middle East that, decides to push a button somewhere. And all hell breaks loose. And you know what that could do to your money, to your wealth. Right, your retirement, to who knows what, right? So we're slaves to the physical world, right? We're slaves to the materialism of this world. We have people, now it's okay, God commands us in the Torah, 6 days a week you shall work. But in the seventh day, you shall rest. Comes a person, and he reaches the seventh day, and what does he say? He says, actually, I want to work in the seventh day. I want to continue my servitude. I got a client to meet in Vegas on Saturday. I've got I can't say no to this client. I've got to go to the ball game because my boss invited me on and I couldn't say, right? So we have this voluntary servitude that we extend from the 6 days into the seventh. Oh, it does. Now it suddenly became very, very personal, right? It happens that we're so influenced, we're so invested in this, in the days of the week, in the 6 days. We so much love our slavery in the 6 days of the week to the point that you don't want to separate yourself from that state of servitude. He's not interested in freedom. He forgot what freedom feels like. Because he's so busy in the rat race, he's so busy chasing his tail, making another buck, that he forgot. He's so busy making a living, he forgot how to live. He forgot what he's living for. Just like the slave in the portion we just read, who says, I love my master. I want to stick around in servitude. To such a person, the Torah says, you are my servants, says God. You're not servants to my servants, right? Don't you're getting too involved in the theater. You're getting too involved in the in the performance. You're forgetting the purpose, the reason behind it all. You're taking the Hollywood movie set too seriously. If you're in a movie, right, you got to act out your scene, okay. But if you get too engaged, you say you want to stay in the scene, you forgot that you're acting. What was that?
Dramaturgy.
Okay, sounds like a good word.
Whatever.
Now,
Whatever.
what is the true essence of a Jew? Why are you here in the first place? God didn't put you in this world so that you can go around chasing another dollar. That wasn't the reason.
That's the real point.
Why he put you in this world. The reason you put into this world is because you're placed here to serve God. What does it mean to serve God? To make for God a home in this world, right? Chuck, we learned about that. To illuminate this world, to be a light unto the nations, to shine the light of consciousness and awareness into the darkest recesses and corners and crevices of this world. That's why we were placed in this world. So you go to work in order to be exposed to people and places where you can illuminate the light of Torah mitzvahs. Like the Jew who went to Morocco on a business trip, and when he came back, he wrote to the previous Rebbe that he was happy to report that he succeeded in setting up a Tanya class in Morocco while he was on a business trip. So the previous Rebbe writes him back and he says, "Thank you very much, but I want you to know, don't fool yourself to think that you went on business and you also made a Tanya class. No. Your soul went to Morocco because you needed to make a Tanya class there. The pretext under which you went to Morocco was the business trip." Right? So the question is, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? What's the means and what's the ends? There was a chassid who came to the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Chabad Rebbe, and he was in a business of galoshin. Galoshin? No, we don't know what they are in Florida. There's such a thing. In certain countries, there's weather that's like the Arctic North Pole, right? So they wear
Like in New York,
like in New York, in Chicago. So they wear boots that are you can't buy them in Florida. They're called galoshin.
Put them over your shoes. It's the same word in English.
Galoshin, same word. Okay. Galoshes. Okay. So this guy was in the business of galoshin, and when he was talking to the Rebbe Maharash in a private audience. This would have been in the 1800s. He was talking to him in a private audience. The Rebbe Maharash noticed that this guy was invested in his business in an unhealthy way. He was too heavily invested in his business. So here's what he said to him. He said to the chassid, Rabbi Yid, he said, it's very surprising. I've seen many people who wear galoshin on their feet, but you're the first time I've ever met a person who wears a galoshin on his head. Right? Think about that. It's very, very interesting, right? King David tells us in the book of Psalms, how do you experience business success? Yegia kapecha kiseichel ashrecha v'tevlach. I'm going to translate that. What'd you say?
Use your brain.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. What did you say? Use your brain?
That's what I said, because you said seichel. So
no, I didn't say seichel. I said a different word. Yegia kapecha kiseichel. It's a different word. The sweat of your palms, that when you eat it, kiseichel, when you eat it, the sweat of your palms, that's when it will be good for you. Ashrecha, you'll be joyous, and it will be good for you. So what's King David giving us with business advice? What is he telling us? Work hard and you'll be successful. Is that what he's saying? Very, very important meaning of King David's words. He doesn't say the sweat of your brain, of your seichel. He doesn't say that. He says the sweat of your palms. If you invest your hands in your work, not your brain and your heart, your hands, you invest in your work, that's when you'll be successful. What that means is that if you invest your head and your heart, which should be devoted to God, instead you're enslaving them to slaves, right? To the dollar, to money, to success, to the materialistic world, then the ending's not going to be well. What King David is saying to us is, look, you have to remember what your priorities are. Your priorities are your identity as a Jew, right? You have to remember why you're making a living. And if you know why you're making a living, then you can make a living. But how many people do you know that they're so busy making money that they're estranged from their own family members? They have a horrible relationship with their marriages, if they're still married, right? They're not even nice people. They don't have any relationship with their own spirituality, but they have a lot of money. So shkoyach. So what did you do? So what do you have? You have a lot of money, but you have no life. So what's that? What's that all about, right? Comes the Torah and it says to us like this: 6 days a week you shall work, but in the seventh day you shall rest. But there is such a strange situation where we'll become so invested in our work that we'll forget what we're doing this for, and it comes the seventh day and we'll say, no, please, Don't give me freedom. I want servitude.
Or worse, you don't even recognize it. You think that that's what life is. You say life doesn't stop just because it's Saturday. I still have
So
to
now,
answer
right,
my email.
all right, and now we can begin to understand why this is the first mitzvah after the Torah was given. Now we're like, oh, okay, I'm getting this now. Instead of now, maybe I do have a reason to come to Shul this Shabbos, because I'm not coming to learn about an obscure law that has absolutely no bearing on my life. No. This mitzvah is coming to remind me that I was at Mount Sinai last week when we got the 10 Commandments. And I better remember my priorities and my true identity if I'm going to experience any form of success in my life, both financial as well as essential success in my life. I've got to remember who I am in order to be able to experience success. Comes the Torah and it says, what?
Which psalm was that? Number what?
Oh, it's like in the 130s.
Okay.
Comes the Torah and it says, no. You are my servants, not servants to my servants. That the Torah is driving the message home that the purpose of a Jew is to serve God, to learn Torah, and to do mitzvahs. And that's the reason why your soul came down to this world. This is your mission. This is why you were dispatched to this world. The Jews are servants of God and not servants to servants. We are not to subjugate ourselves to matters of materialism and to become codependent on them. Do you know people that are codependent on their money? Ooh. What would happen to you if you lost all your money? I mean, God forbid.
Some people throw themselves over the top of a building.
Right. Think about that. Some people just kill themselves. Right. That's what they do because they define themselves by their money. This is their entire existence, right? We should never be tested.
Exactly.
We should never be tested, right? And that's why a Jew's mission in this world is to take advantage of all the physical things that he engages with, the places that he goes, the possessions that he owns, in order to use them in the service of the divine. And therefore, how do you know what your true priorities are? The litmus test is Shabbos. Is the sabbatical year, the 7th year, when you let your field lie fallow. So what your behavior in the 7th year will tell you the true intention of your work in the 4th and the 5th year, right? Because the fact that you're able to stop working in the 7th year tells you that you were only using the sweat of your palms in the previous 6 years or the previous 6 days, right? But if you can pull away in the 7th year, you're not a believer. You're believing in the gods of materialism, not in one God and God Almighty. And therefore, when Shabbos comes, the Jew rises. He rises to his core, where he's fully invested in an atmosphere of holiness, fully invested in his service of God. And how do we welcome the Shabbos? If you light the Shabbos candles with your wife, how do you do this? We go like this, right? What are we doing here? Have you seen your wives do this? Mm-hmm. Is that their motion? Maybe they go like this, right? I'm never really there when my wife does it, but I think they go like this, right? Yeah. And the reason they do that, what are you gathering in the lights or something? Like, what's the mean? The reason is because 6 days a week, I'm frazzled. I'm disjointed. I'm all over the map. Comes Shabbos and it's inward, reflecting on my core values, on who I am. And that's what's drawing in the light. The light is clarity, consciousness. And how do you find consciousness? You find that by pulling inwards. In fact, if you want to experience rest on the 7th day, rest on the 7th day doesn't happen by running out of yourself. It happens by reflecting in on yourself, by connecting to your core inner values. And this is the command which God tells us in this week's portion. You are my servants and not servants to my servants. This command is what gives us the strength and the ability to fulfill our purpose. When a Jew remembers that he's a servant of God, he's then freed from his exile, his personal exile, a personal Egypt, your personal slavery. He rises above his physicality, and he thus hastens the redemption for himself, as well as the redemption of all of our collective, of all of humanity, with the rise of clear consciousness, higher consciousness, the coming of Mashiach, may it happen speedily in our days. How do you feel about this, folks? Any questions, comments, critique? Got the message?
Good stuff.
Rob, you're looking at me like a...
I didn't realize that the Torah was written just for those of us in Palm Beach Gardens.
Mm-hmm. That's how personal it is, hey? Amazing. That's good. I like that.
But no, you won't. Because, there's the old adage, you can't teach freedom to a starving man. Everything you said works well when you're talking to a group of people who have a certain amount of financial security, success or independence. But go talk, Give this discussion to a guy who has 4 children and is making $6 an hour about chasing the dollar, not working on the shabas. It's to use another metaphor, since this Parsha is very big on oxes, it all depends on whose ox is being
Just
born.
replace the word ox with Mercedes-Benz, and it will become.
It all depends on
That's a
whose
different
ox is being
metaphor.
born. I get it. It makes sense for us. But
Okay, so 2 points. Two very important points. I love your comment. 2 very important points. First of all, this teaching comes from the Rebbe. The Rebbe is the shepherd, the spiritual shepherd of our generation. Okay, which means that the Rebbe is feeding his sheep the food that they need. So the Rebbe is talking to us, and I am honored that you feel so incredibly connected to this obscure law right now that you feel that's only written for you and not for everybody else. That's fantastic. No, but I think that's good. The fact that it's talking to you is good. But let me tell you another story. I think that you, with respect, my friend, cannot relate to the freedoms experienced by the poor. And I'll give you an example. So there's a great story of a guy who's a very, very successful entrepreneur. And he's finally able to retire. And he goes out somewhere in Mexico to some unheard of river. And he goes out fishing all by himself in a canoe. And he sees, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. You know the story, right? And he sees a fisherman sleeping in his own canoe next to him. And he says, "You yucks, what are you doing here? It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Why don't you go get a job?" So he says, well, the guy wakes up. He's like, "What do you want from me?" He says, "Why don't you go get a job? It's 10 o'clock in the morning. You're young." He says, "Why should I get a job?" "So you can work, you can make money." "Why would I need to work and make money?" "So you can retire." "So what would I do when I retire?" You can be like me. You can come to Mexico in a canoe and you can sleep in the morning." "That's what I'm doing already."
So buy a fleet of boats, you can build a big business. Right?
Exactly. I want to tell you something, Rob. I want to tell you something. That the rich are more struggle more with slavery than the poor.
Yep.
Tell that to a guy who's trying to feed his family.
No, poor people don't necessarily work 7 days a week, And I'm thinking both on, whether it's in this country or out of this country. Most countries, there is a day when nobody works, okay, or the vast majority of people don't work. Now, you're right. If you're that destitute that you've got to put food on the
they're
table.
not working because they decided to take the day off in devotion to God.
Right.
It's because the factory closed, the store closed. They can't work that day.
I want to tell you something. Ethics of the Fathers tells us, Mar b'nechasim, mar b'daiga. You have the more possessions you have, the more anxiety you have. Which means the less possessions you have, the less anxiety you have. Some people live a very simple life, and it's beautiful. And I want to tell you, there's many Jews that voluntarily, they go to yeshiva, and they study, and this is their entire life's desire to study Torah all day and all night, kind of like we learned in the Hayom Yom a few minutes ago. They have the opposite approach, right, of what we discussed earlier. And what they do is they want to have nothing to do with the material world. That they marry a woman who wants a simple life. They want to have a lot of kids. They don't need any money. She goes to work lovingly so that he can sit and study Torah all day long. Now, I personally don't relate to this, but there are people like this, okay? She works in the store or something, I can tell you, we have a bookkeeper here, Chabad. She's in Israel, okay? She's a religious woman. She works, I can tell, she's working, you hear the kids in the background and stuff. She's very, very, very good. She's working, and I get the impression from her that her husband is in Kollel. He's studying Torah. She's making good money. She services a lot of Chabad houses like this, like remotely, and she's very good at what she does. And her husband is lovingly doing Torah study all day long, and they probably have like 8 kids or something, and they're very happy. This is all they want—a very simple life. They want a simple life. They don't need more than that. And when you don't have a lot of resources, you don't have to worry about Mercedes-Benz oil changes, and very simple. People don't have a car. They walk to work. They walk to the yeshiva. Life is easy. I think that we actually struggle in Palm Beach more with slavery. The poor person comes Shabbos, he's like, "I'm done. I'm not doing any more work," right? Think about it. The employer or the employee? Who's going to be more likely to work on Shabbos? The employer or the employee? Of course, the employer. Employee clocks out at 5 o'clock, man, I'm done. 1 o'clock Friday afternoon, the week's over. The employer is like, "Oh my God, I'm pushing it to the limit." I mean, you don't agree with me? At least I have Michael to support me.
God bless all of you.
You never stop working if you're a boss. You're always planning, doing.
Yeah,
The more
yeah,
you
he's
work,
with
the
me.
more you need to work.
Yeah, but even if you're not a boss, it's still.
You know what?
Yeah, it's the American way.
You guys
I
have
agree
had
with
good
you.
lives.
Oh, so Harvey's agreeing.
No, I agree. I've known plenty of people like that, and even poor people.
Yeah, exactly. Go in the inner city.
Hey, give Harvey a chance, guys.
I mean, even poor people who don't have much and have a simple life can appreciate it, and they go to church or they go to synagogue and go about their life. Or if they put something on the table.
You know, you remind me of
There's no
Muttel.
choice.
You remind me of Muttel the tailor.
Right.
But you're just a poor tailor, right? And he says, Reb Tevye, even a poor tailor has the right to be happy. You remember this? Look, Rob, I want to tell you that I want to just conclude and say that not everybody is an indentured servant. Some people, they don't have these problems. They actually embrace freedom lovingly. But those amongst us that struggle with freedom, you know, we're so free that we don't realize how much slaves we are, how enslaved we are.
Exactly.
You know what? If it speaks to you, that's exactly my point. Don't worry about everybody else. Fix yourself first, and then we'll worry about other people. Point is that the Torah is so incredibly personal. When you study the inside of Torah, the Chassidus of Torah, you take a message like this, which seems so removed from us, and you make it personal. It's just beautiful, and I'm glad that you found it personal. And this is the first message that we learn after the Torah is given, because we have to remember our priorities. What?
I always loved was Mishpatim and then Kiddushin, which have all these laws. This follows the big ones, the Big 10 one, okay, which don't kill, don't do this, okay, yeah. But now you get down to the real nitty gritty in all of these, and it's so
Down to the
brilliant.
grassroots.
To me, this is Hashem. This is so brilliant when you put it in the context of those days in particular. It's human nature. It gets right to the core of people.
Amazing. You need to be able to have a Rebbe to guide you to that. But I just want to say also, guys, about Shabbos, I want to encourage you to raise the bar. Think about, taking your Shabbos observance to the next level. Look at Marty. He came to Shabbos this week. That was amazing. Amazing, Marty. I was so inspired. He started coming. He came 1 week in a row, right? 1 week in a row.
That was a lot.
And he came. That was a big deal. It's the hardest week to come is the first one.
You should see how hard it was for him to walk. I walked in with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Walking like an old man. And
But I want to tell
I'm an
you,
old man.
guys,
I said
consider.
to Nikki, I said, "This guy sitting there." I said, "The guy looks exactly like Marty." I said, "He looks exactly like Marty."
And
Oh, you know what I
Mickey
mean?
took his glasses off.
Folks, I want to encourage you to raise the bar. Shabbos dinner at your home. Do you have a Shabbos dinner at your home?
Yep.
Do you have a TV off rule? Do you have an internet, a power down rule on a Friday night?
Yep.
Think about that. Imagine you have a power down rule on a Friday night. There's no phones, there's no internet, there's no television. There's just FaceTime, like real people,
Yep.
right? Imagine you do that. Or maybe if you think about walking to shul. I got to tell you, that is life changing. When you start walking to shul, it is absolutely life changing. I know that would require potentially a move. But think about it. Seriously, guys, you should know real estate within walking distance of the Chabad is a very good investment, because as the community grows, the property walking distance of the Chabad, especially within the Eruv. The Eruv is between the 95 here and the DoubleTree Hotel. On that side of the road, within the Eruv, it's actually much more desirable to live within the walking distance and to be able to carry within the Eruv and Shabbos. It's a big deal. So I want to highly encourage you to think about it. Maybe it's time for a move a little bit closer to shul. And if you could do that, you would transform your experience. Yes.
Not only having a Friday night dinner, but it's nice also to invite guests.
Oh, exactly. You should become a host. It's a beautiful thing. Folks, I want to welcome everybody online. Ed and Stephen Clark, Garrett, and I see it's the first time Marlene Parkin. Great to have you here with us. Elaine, Fran, Winston, everybody here. Great stuff, guys. Have a lovely day. Remember, don't be a slave, guys. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Shalom.
You realize